The scent of rain-soaked asphalt and my daughter's expensive perfume filled the entryway, a cloying combination that always set my teeth on edge. "Just for an hour, Mom," Clara said, her voice tight as a piano wire. She deliberately avoided my eyes, her gaze fixed on the tiny, blanketed bundle nestled in the crook of her arm as if it were a bomb she was about to defuse. "I have a last-minute meeting with a client. It's a make-or-break deal. You're a lifesaver." There was a brittle quality to her tone, a frantic edge that belied the simplicity of the request. She didn't wait for my assent, for the dutiful nod I was already forming. She simply advanced, pushing the heavy baby carrier into my arms with a surgeon's precision. The weight of it startled me, as it always did. He was so small, so impossibly fragile, yet he felt as dense as a little star. His name was Leo. He was 6 weeks old. And he was, supposedly, my grandson. Comment on which city you're watching and subscribe to the channel because I guarantee there's more to this story than meets the eye. Clara was already turning away, a frantic retreat. Her car keys jingled a nervous, discordant tune in her hand. Her knuckles were white where she gripped them. "His bag is right there." She gestured with her chin toward a large, ridiculously overstuffed diaper bag slumped by the door. It looked more like a duffel bag for a week-long trip. "Everything you need is in it. Diapers, formula, a change of clothes, his favorite blanket. I'll be back by 4 at the latest. I promise." The word promise hung in the air between us, thin and brittle as a spider's thread. A promise from Clara used to be like money in the bank. Now it felt like a question. I looked down at the baby. His eyes, the same deep, stormy blue as Clara's, were wide open, staring up at me with a solemn, unblinking curiosity that felt ancient. He wasn't crying, he just watched me, taking my measure. Before I could form a single word, not that she would have waited to hear it, the front door clicked shut with a dead, final sound. The engine of her sleek German sedan roared to life, and the squeal of tires on wet pavement echoed down the quiet suburban street. It was a sound of panicked flight, not a hurried departure. An hour. Surely, I could handle an hour. The first hour passed in a disorienting blur of coos and gurgles, smells of baby powder and warm milk that dredged up memories from a lifetime ago. I settled onto my favorite armchair, the worn floral one my late husband, Robert, always claimed was molded perfectly to his shape. I held Leo against my chest, his little head tucked under my chin. The warmth of his tiny body seeped through my blouse, a profound, comforting heat that settled deep in my bones, chasing away some of the chill Clara had left behind. Robert would have loved this. He'd always had a way with the girls when they were small, a patience I could only envy. He would have known what to do with Clara's strange behavior. He would have seen right through it. I had forgotten this feeling, the profound and simple joy of holding a new life. It was a feeling I thought I'd lost forever. Clara, my eldest, was a high-powered attorney, a woman who measured her life in billable hours and courtroom victories. Always busy, always climbing, always with a 5-year plan. She'd had Leo late, a surprise at 38 after a string of relationships that never quite fit into her schedule. I worried she saw him more as a project to be managed than a child to be loved, another box to be checked on the list of a successful life. But watching him now, his tiny, perfect fingers with their seashell pink nails curled around my thumb, I felt a surge of pure, uncomplicated love that washed away my lingering resentments. He was here. He was real. That was all that mattered. 4 o'clock came and went. The grandfather clock in the hall, a wedding gift from my parents, chimed its 4 solemn notes. I glanced at the window, expecting to see Clara's headlights slice through the gloom of the rainy afternoon. Nothing. The street remained empty. That's all right, I told myself, rocking Leo gently. These big city meetings, they always run long. At 4:30, the knot of maternal anxiety I knew so well began to tighten in my stomach. I balanced Leo on my hip and walked to the kitchen, dialing her cell. It went straight to voicemail, not even a single ring. "Clara, honey, it's Mom. It's getting late. Leo's been an angel, but I'm just checking in. Call me." I tried to keep the tremor out of my voice, to sound casual and unconcerned. She was probably just stuck in traffic. That's what I told myself as the grandfather clock chimed 5, each note landing like a small stone in the pit of my stomach. By 6 o'clock, the knot of dread was no longer a knot. It was a cold, heavy stone. The sun was setting, and the fading light painted long, spooky shadows across the living room, turning familiar chairs and tables into crouching beasts. Leo, as if sensing the shift in my mood, was starting to fuss, his little face scrunching up for a real cry. His internal clock knew it was past time for his mother's return. The house felt too quiet, the silence pressing in on me. I called her office line. An automated message told me the office was closed. I called her partner, a man named David I'd met once at a holiday party. He sounded surprised to hear from me. A client meeting? No, Eleanor, she took a personal day today. Said she was feeling under the weather. Is everything all right? Under the weather. The lie was so blatant, so unnecessary that it made the hair on my arms stand up. Why lie to her partner? Why lie to me? My heart began to hammer a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I decided to open the enormous diaper bag Clara had left. Maybe there was a pacifier or a favorite toy inside that could soothe Leo. My fingers fumbled with a heavy-duty zipper. The first thing I saw was what I expected: stacks of diapers, a can of formula, wipes, 3 changes of clothes, all neatly folded. Classic Clara, always over-prepared. But her level of preparation seemed extreme. I dug deeper, past a cellular blanket and a small library of board books. My fingers brushed against something cold and stiff. Envelopes. 3 of them, thick and bulging, sealed with tape. They were standard manila envelopes, but they felt heavy, dense. With a shaking hand, I pulled one out. It was shockingly heavy. I tore at the seal, my nails catching on the tape. My breath caught in my throat. It was full of $100 bills, neatly stacked, bound with paper bands from a bank. I pulled out the contents of the other 2 envelopes. More cash. I sat on the floor, surrounded by a small fortune, the scent of money mingling with the scent of baby powder. A quick, clumsy count told me there were at least $30,000 here. My mind reeled. What kind of a 1-hour babysitting job came with a bag full of cash? This wasn't for a client meeting. This was getaway money. Panic, cold and sharp, seized me. I rummaged through the bag with a new desperation, no longer looking for a pacifier but for an answer. My fingers closed around a hard, rectangular object tucked into a zippered side pocket. A cheap, disposable burner phone, still in its plastic packaging. Next to it was a folded piece of paper, thick and official looking. With trembling fingers that felt like someone else's, I unfolded the note. It wasn't a letter. It wasn't an explanation. It was a birth certificate, a certified copy from the State Vital Records office. My eyes scanned the details, the black ink stark against the watermarked paper. Child's name, Leo Miller. Date of birth, 6 weeks ago. Place of birth, St. Jude's Hospital, Pine Creek, a small town in the next state I'd never heard of. My eyes raced to the line I was searching for. The one that would ground me, the one that would make sense of this madness. Mother's name. I expected to see Clara Elizabeth Miller. But the space was filled with 2 words that made the world tilt on its axis and send me spinning into a silent, screaming void. Rose Ann Miller. My other daughter. My wild, beautiful, broken Rose. The daughter I hadn't seen or spoken to in 5 years. The world seemed to shrink to the 4 walls of my living room. The ticking of the grandfather clock grew impossibly loud, each tick a hammer blow against my skull. Rose. It couldn't be. It made no sense. Clara had been pregnant. I'd seen her belly grow over our weekly video calls, a subtle swell at first, then an undeniable, proud curve. I'd gone with her to buy the crib, a beautiful piece of white painted oak. We'd spent a weekend painting the nursery in her pristine apartment a soft, buttery yellow. She had sent me ultrasound pictures, those ghostly black and white smudges that she'd proudly pointed out were his nose and his little feet. Had it all been a lie? An elaborate, months-long deception? My mind became a maelstrom, desperately trying to connect the jagged pieces of this new reality. The frantic departure, the overstuffed bag, the lies to her partner, the cash, the burner phone, and now this. Rose's name on a birth certificate for a baby Clara had passed off as her own. It was a puzzle whose pieces were made of glass shards, and every way I tried to fit them together, I bled. Leo let out a full-throated wail from my lap, a piercing cry of hunger and confusion that snapped me out of my paralytic trance. His needs were immediate, real, an anchor in the swirling chaos of my thoughts. I pushed the terrifying questions aside, compartmentalizing my terror with a mother's instinct I didn't know I still possessed. I went through the motions. I stood on unsteady legs and walked to the kitchen, the birth certificate clutched in my hand. I mixed a bottle of formula, my hands shaking so badly that white powder dusted the counter. I changed his diaper on the living room rug, my movements stiff and robotic. I rocked him, my body a tense, unyielding frame, and hummed the same lullaby I had sung to both my girls when they were babies. Golden slumbers kiss your eyes. The melody felt like a ghost on my tongue, the words a bitter irony as I paced back and forth across the worn oriental rug. My eyes kept drifting back to the birth certificate lying on the coffee table next to the stacks of cash it looked like evidence at a crime scene. Rose. My Rose, where was she? Had she even held this baby? And where in God's name was Clara, and what fresh hell had our family fallen into now? The days that followed blurred into a sleepless, anxiety-ridden haze. I was adrift in a sea of terrifying unknowns, with only the rhythmic demands of a newborn to keep me tethered to reality feed. Burp, change, sleep, repeat in the quiet moments between. The questions would rush back in. A suffocating tide. I called Clara's law firm again on Monday morning, forcing a breezy, maternal tone into my voice. A clipped, professional receptionist informed me that Ms. Miller was on an indefinite personal leave. The word indefinite struck me like a physical blow. You don't take indefinite leave for a one-day flu. I delved into Clara's social circle, calling the few friends whose numbers I had stored in my old address book. They were evasive, their voices laced with a practiced discomfort that told me they knew more than they were saying, or at least that they had been instructed to say nothing. I'm sure she's fine, Eleanor, her friend Jessica said, her voice a little too bright. Clara's resourceful. She probably just needed a break, the pressure of the new baby and all. A break? You don't take a break by abandoning your newborn son and a fortune in cash with your 68-year-old mother. You don't prepare for a break with a burner phone. This wasn't a vacation. It was an escape. I was utterly alone with a baby I barely knew, a baby who was the living embodiment of a secret that was eating me alive. Every time the phone rang, I jumped, my heart lurching with a painful mix of hope and dread. Hope that it was Clara, safe and ready to explain. Dread that it was a hospital or the police. But it was never her. It was just telemarketers selling me things I didn't need, or my next-door neighbor, Martha, calling to ask if I needed anything from the store. I tried to act normal to keep up the facade. Clara just had to go out of town for a work emergency. I'd lie, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. A big case. She'll be back soon. Martha, a sweet woman but relentlessly nosy, would eye the new baby paraphernalia cluttering my once tidy home with thinly veiled suspicion. I could see the questions in her eyes, but thankfully, she was too polite to ask them directly. One afternoon, while rocking a fussy Leo to sleep, a memory surfaced, unbidden and sharp as broken glass. Rose, at 16, standing in this very room, her face a mess of black mascara and tears, her knuckles white as she gripped the back of a chair. You don't get it. You and her, you're the perfect ones. Saint Clara and her perfect mother. I can't be perfect. I don't even want to be. She had been screaming at me, but her eyes were on Clara, who stood silently by the fireplace, her expression unreadable. Rose had stormed out that night and not come back for 3 days. It was the beginning of the end, the first of many such disappearances, each one chipping away another piece of my heart. Rose was fire and chaos, passion and pain. Clara was ice and order, logic and control. They were night and day, and they had orbited each other with a tense, magnetic pull their entire lives. Clara, the dutiful older sister, always cleaning up Rose's messes, always the responsible one, her disapproval a silent, constant judgment. And me, caught in the middle, loving them both so fiercely but never knowing how to bridge the chasm that separated them. A chasm I had, perhaps, helped to dig. A week into my new, bewildering reality, after endless hours of staring at the burner phone sitting on my kitchen counter like an unexploded bomb, I decided I couldn't wait any longer. I had to do something. My hands felt clumsy as I tore open the plastic packaging, popped the SIM card into the cheap handset, and powered it on. The screen lit up with a generic, pixelated image of a mountain. There were no contacts, no messages, no call history. It was a blank slate, a ghost of a phone. For 2 days, it sat there, silent and ominous. I checked it every 10 minutes, my stomach churning. I felt like I was waiting for a verdict. Then, on a Tuesday night, as I was washing baby bottles in the sink, my hands submerged in hot, soapy water, it buzzed. The vibration against the granite countertop was so sudden and violent it made me gasp. An unknown number, my heart leaped into my throat. I dried my hands on a dish towel, my palms slick with a fresh layer of sweat, and answered. Hello? My voice was a croak. Silence. Then, a faint, rustling sound like leaves skittering across pavement. A shaky intake of breath. Mom? The voice was a whisper, so cracked and terrified I almost didn't recognize it. It was Clara. Clara. Oh, thank God. Where are you? Are you okay? What is going on? The baby, the money. Clara, talk to me. The questions tumbled out of me in a frantic, desperate rush. I can't talk, she whispered, her voice strained, the words clipped with fear. I could hear the sound of traffic in the background, a horn blaring. She was outside. She was on the move. Don't call the police. Mom, do you hear me? Do not call the police. Don't trust anyone. Just keep him safe. Please, Mom. Keep Leo safe. Before I could ask another question, before I could even form a protest, the line went dead. I stared at the phone, the dial tone a mocking, monotonous drone in my ear. Don't trust anyone, the words echoed in the silent kitchen. A warning that sent a fresh wave of ice through my veins. This wasn't just a family drama, a sordid secret about a baby's parentage. This was something dangerous. This was a threat. The fear was a physical thing now. A constant companion that sat on my chest and made it hard to breathe. It had a taste. Metallic and sour. I started noticing things, or maybe my fear was making me imagine them. A dark blue sedan parked at the end of our cul-de-sac. For 2 days straight it was there when I peered through the blinds in the morning. And it was still there when I checked before triple locking the doors at night. The windows were tinted. But I could make out a silhouette in the driver's seat, a faceless shape that made my skin crawl. Was I being watched? The thought was paranoid, something out of a cheap thriller. But after Clara's call, nothing felt impossible. I began to feel like a prisoner in my own home. I only left for absolute necessities. Baby formula, bread, milk, scurrying to and from my car with my head down. Leo clutched tightly against my chest in his carrier, a tiny, precious shield. My days were measured in feedings and diaper changes, my nights in long, agonizing hours of staring at the ceiling. My mind a frantic carousel of what-ifs. I pored over the birth certificate again and again, as if the paper itself held a secret code I could crack if I just stared hard enough. Rose and Miller, father. Unknown. The words were a brutal dead end. The hospital was in Pine Creek. I looked it up on the internet. It was a small, rural town, the kind of place people go to disappear. Why there? Why not here, where I could have helped? The questions piled up, forming a wall between me and the quiet, orderly life I had known just a few weeks ago. To distract myself, to feel some semblance of control in a situation where I had none, I climbed the creaking pull-down stairs to the attic. I told myself I was looking for more of Clara's old baby clothes for Leo, but it was a lie. I don't know what I was looking for. A clue, a sign, anything to make sense of the nightmare I was living. The air was thick with the smell of old wood, dust, and time. I opened a trunk marked Clara, expecting to find report cards and spelling bee trophies. Instead, I found a showbox tucked in the corner, labeled simply Rose. I knew instantly that Clara had packed it, had saved it. Inside were letters. Dozens of them, tied in faded ribbon. They were from Rose, written to Clara from the various rehabs and wellness centers she'd bounced between over the past decade. I sat on the dusty floorboards, the single bare bulb casting a weak yellow glow, and I read. The letters painted a picture of a life I had only glimpsed from the outside, a life of desperation, of small, fleeting triumphs and crushing, relentless defeats in the battle against her demons. But woven through the fabric of her pain was a constant, shining thread. Clara. Clara sent me money for new socks. The ones with the cats on them. Nobody else remembered I liked those. Clara called my counselor again to check on me. He said she asks harder questions than a prosecutor. That sounds like her. Clara told me not to give up. She said she'd never give up on me, even if I give up on myself. I read for hours, my back aching against a wooden chest, tears streaming down my face. Dripping onto the brittle pages, I had always seen Clara as the one who was burdened by Rose, the one who was embarrassed and resentful. I never realized the depth of her devotion. She wasn't just a sister. She was a secret lifeline, a silent, unyielding champion. My guilt was a physical weight, pressing down on my soul. How could I have been so blind? In the last letter, dated about 10 months ago, postmarked from a town near Pine Creek, Rose wrote something that made me stop breathing. I met someone. His name is Mark. He's different. See, he's in the program too. He sees me, the real me, under all the junk. I think this is it. I'm finally happy. He says we can build a life together, away from everything. Mark. The name felt like a stone dropping into a dark, deep well. Was he the father unknown? Was he the reason for the burner phone, the cash, the fear in Clara's voice? A new, more specific fear began to take shape. It wasn't just that my daughters were lost. It was that they were running from someone the next day. As if summoned by my discovery, I found the final piece of the puzzle. I was repacking the diaper bag, trying to organize the chaos, when my hand brushed against something soft and lumpy at the very bottom, hidden beneath a spare blanket. It was a small, worn, one-eyed teddy bear. Its fur was matted, its ears were frayed, and one of its button eyes was missing, replaced by a clumsy series of black stitches. My breath hitched. I knew those stitches. I had made them myself more than 30 years ago. It was Patches. It had been Rose's. She had loved that bear with a fierce, primal possessiveness, refusing to sleep without it clutched in her hand until she was nearly 10 years old. Clara had never cared for stuffed animals. She'd preferred books and puzzles, things with order and logic. This bear in this bag was not a mistake. It was a message. A confirmation flare fired from a sinking ship. Leo was Rose's son. Subscribe now, you won't believe the twist that's coming. The realization didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a fresh, gaping wound. My grandson, my poor, lost Rose, had a child. And my other daughter, my stoic, responsible Clara, had orchestrated this entire elaborate, terrifying charade to protect them. The sheer scale of her sacrifice crashed down on me. The fake pregnancy, the padding she must have worn, the lies to her firm, her friends, to me. She had systematically dismantled her entire life to save her sisters. My anger toward Clara, the resentment that had been simmering for weeks, evaporated in an instant, replaced by a wave of staggering awe and a crushing, unbearable guilt. How could I have ever thought she was cold or selfish? How could I have so profoundly misjudged my own child? The blue sedan was gone the next morning. My relief was a brief, sunlit moment in a gathering storm. That evening, as I was pureeing sweet potatoes in the kitchen, there was a knock at the door. It wasn't the friendly rap of a neighbor. It was a hard, impatient banging that rattled the frame and my nerves. My heart seized. Leo was asleep in his crib upstairs. I crept to the peephole, my body trembling. A man stood on my porch, silhouetted by the dying light. He was tall and painfully thin, with greasy, stringy hair and a nervous energy that seemed to radiate off him in waves. He looked less like a hardened criminal and more like a starving wolf, but there was a hungry, predatory glint in his eyes that terrified me to my core. He knocked again, harder this time, the sound echoing through the silent house. "Eleanor Miller? I know you're in there. I'm a friend of Rose's. We need to talk." Rose's friend. Mark. It had to be him. My mind raced, faster than it had in years. Clara's warning, "Don't trust anyone," screamed in my head. I backed away from the door, my hand clamped over my mouth to stifle my own panicked breaths. I grabbed my cell phone from the counter and retreated to the back of the house, my back pressed against the cool kitchen wall. He started shouting now, his voice muffled but clear, laced with a dangerous impatience. "I know she's here. I know you have the kid. Clara said you'd have everything ready. Just give him to me and she'll be fine. She sent me here." A lie. A vicious, transparent lie designed to manipulate an old woman. Clara would never send this man to my door. He wasn't a friend. He was hunting them. I dialed 911, my fingers shaking so badly I misdialed twice before I could press the numbers correctly. I have an intruder trying to break into my house. I whispered into the phone, my voice a thready, unrecognizable thing. I gave the dispatcher my address, my words tumbling over each other. As I spoke, I heard a sickening crack from the front of the house, the sound of splintering wood. He was trying to break the lock. I dropped the phone and ran upstairs, my 68-year-old body moving with an adrenaline-fueled speed I didn't know it possessed. My only thought was Leo. I burst into the nursery, my old guest room, and scooped the sleeping baby from his crib. He stirred, making a small, questioning sound, but didn't wake. I ran into my own bedroom at the end of the hall, locked the door behind me, and shoved my husband's heavy old mahogany dresser in front of it, my muscles screaming with the unaccustomed effort. Downstairs, I heard the crash of the front door splintering open, giving way. Heavy footsteps stomped into the house. He was in. He was in my house. Eleanor, you're making this a lot harder than it needs to be. His voice echoed up the stairs, raw and menacing. My safe, quiet house, the house I had shared with Robert for 40 years, was no longer safe. It had been violated. I held Leo tighter, his small body a warm, living anchor in my sea of terror. I could hear him opening and slamming doors downstairs, ransacking my life, searching for his prize. The burner phone, which I had tucked into my pocket out of habit, suddenly buzzed to life. I almost dropped the baby. It was Clara. A new message. "Mom, don't pick up." Her voice came through in a frantic, garbled voicemail that must have just been sent. He took my phone. "He knows where you are. He tracked me. He thinks you have the money. I'm so sorry, Mom. God, I'm so sorry." I tried to let him away. "Get out of there. Take Leo and run." The message cut off. He had her. Or he'd had her. This monster had my daughter. A rage I had never known, a cold, clear fury, burned through my fear like a blowtorch. He had hurt my girls. He was in my house. He was threatening my grandson. And he was not going to win. The footsteps started up the stairs. Thump, 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 each one a drumbeat of doom. I looked around the room, my eyes wild and desperate. They landed on Robert's old fireplace poker, resting in its brass stand by the cold hearth. He'd only ever used it to nudge logs, but it was made of heavy, solid iron. I grabbed it, the cold weight a reassuring and terrible power in my hand. The doorknob to the bedroom rattled violently. He pushed against the door, and the dresser I'd moved scraped a half-inch against the floor but held firm. "Come on, you stupid old lady. Don't be a hero." He threw his full body weight against the door. A long, vertical crack appeared in the wood panel. He was going to get through. Just then, faint at first, then growing rapidly closer, I heard the most beautiful sound in the world, the wail of sirens. Hope, sharp and blindingly bright, pierced through my terror. He heard them too. He let out a string of vicious curses and slammed his fist against the door one last time, a gesture of pure, impotent rage. "This isn't over," he screamed, and then I heard his footsteps pounding back down the stairs and the sound of his ragged flight out the broken front door. I stood there, shaking uncontrollably, clutching my grandson in one arm and the fireplace poker in the other, until I heard the heavy, reassuring boots of the police in my foyer and a calm, authoritative voice calling, "Ma'am? Police, are you all right?" The immediate danger was over. But the nightmare was just beginning to unfold. The police were kind but firm, their presence a strange invasion of uniforms and officialdom in my ravaged home. Their questions were a barrage I could barely process through the fog of shock. They took my statement, a young officer patiently writing as my story tumbled out in a fractured, nonlinear narrative of perfume and promises, of cash and birth certificates. They dusted for fingerprints, their black powder coating every surface. They secured the house, boarding up the splintered remains of my front door. The man, whose name they quickly confirmed was Mark Rendell, had a long and ugly criminal record. Assault, possession, theft. They put out an all-points bulletin for his arrest and, more importantly, for Clara. An Amber Alert was issued for her. My daughter, the successful lawyer, was now a missing person, a face on the news, possibly a hostage. The next few hours were a surreal blur of flashing red and blue lights painting my walls, sober-faced officers moving with quiet purpose, and the constant, gentle weight of Leo sleeping on my shoulder, blissfully unaware. I told them everything. The whole impossible story. I showed them the cash, the burner phone, the one-eyed teddy bear, the birth certificate. I saw the look of disbelief in their eyes slowly shift to one of grim understanding. This wasn't a simple domestic dispute. This was dark. As dawn broke, casting a pale, gray light over the wreckage of my home, a detective with weary eyes and a kind face sat across from me at my kitchen table. He'd made me a cup of tea that I hadn't touched. "Mrs. Miller," he said gently, "we found your daughter's car. It was abandoned in a parking lot about 30 miles from here." There were signs of a struggle. He paused, letting the words sink in, and I braced myself for the worst. "But we think she got away. We found her purse and phone discarded nearby, but tracks led into the woods. It seems Mark chased her, but a farmer a few miles from there reported seeing a woman matching her description, distraught, muddy, getting into a long-haul truck at a highway rest stop around midnight. It seems your daughter is still running. She's smart, Mrs. Miller. She's a fighter." Relief and fear warred within me, a nauseating cocktail of emotions. She was alive. She was free from him, at least for now. But she was still out there somewhere, alone and terrified, a fugitive in her own life. 2 agonizing days later, they caught him. Mark Rendell was found hiding out in a cheap, squalid motel 2 states over, apprehended without a fight. The news came via a call from the detective. He was in custody. He wasn't talking, refusing to say a word about Rose or Clara. But it didn't matter. He was caged. He was off the streets. He couldn't hurt my girls anymore. I collapsed into a chair, the crushing tension that had held my body rigid for weeks finally releasing in a flood of ragged, grateful sobs. Leo, sensing my distress, began to cry too. I picked him up and held him close, burying my face in the soft, clean smell of his hair. "It's okay, little one," I whispered, though I was saying it as much for myself as for him. "We're safe now. We're safe." A week after Mark's arrest, a week of blessed, silent normalcy filled only with the sounds of a baby, the burner phone rang one more time. I answered it, my hand steady now. "Mom?" It was Clara. Her voice was no longer a terrified whisper, but was thick with a profound exhaustion and a fragile, tentative relief. "They got him," I said, tears instantly welling in my eyes, hot and cleansing. "Clara, they got him. He's in jail. You can come home." I heard a choked, shuddering sob on the other end of the line. "I'm on my way," she said. "I'll be there tomorrow." The reunion on my front porch, the same spot where she had so hastily abandoned her precious cargo, was not one of words. When Clara's taxi pulled up to the curb, she practically fell out of the car. She looked 10 years older, thinner, haunted, with dark, bruised circles under her eyes, but she was whole. She was here. I met her on the steps, and we just held each other, a mother and daughter who had been to hell and back, clinging to each other as if we were the only 2 people left in the world. When she finally pulled away, her raw, red-rimmed eyes went past me, into the house, searching with a desperate hunger. I knew who she was looking for. "He's sleeping," I said softly, taking her hand. "Come inside. He's safe." Later that evening, with Leo asleep in his bassinet placed between us on the sofa like a tiny, peaceful treaty, Clara finally told me the whole story. It was uglier and more complicated than I could have ever imagined. Rose had met Mark in a court-mandated recovery program. He was a classic wolf in sheep's clothing, charming and attentive, feeding on her vulnerability. He had systematically pulled her back into the dark world of addiction she'd been fighting so hard to escape, isolating her from her counselors and the few friends she had until he was all she had left. When she got pregnant, he saw the baby not as a son, but as a commodity, a leverage tool. He had connections to a black market adoption ring and planned to sell his own child to pay off his mounting debts. Rose, in a moment of terrifying clarity, realizing the monster she was with and the fate that awaited her son, had called Clara. It was their first contact in almost a year, and Clara, without a moment's hesitation, had set her impossible plan in motion. She drained her savings and retirement accounts for the cash, a fund to help Rose start a new life. The fake pregnancy was a desperate, brilliant cover, a way to explain the sudden arrival of a baby to the world, to her firm, to me. It would give Leo a legitimate identity and a safe home until Rose was strong enough, clean enough, to re-enter his life without Mark ever knowing he existed. The original plan was for Rose to go into hiding at a secure facility while Clara took Leo and established their new life. But Mark was more clever and more paranoid than they'd anticipated. He'd become suspicious when Rose vanished, and he had secretly put a tracker on Clara's car. The drop-off at your house wasn't the plan. Mom, Clara said, her voice cracking as she stared at her sleeping nephew. I was on my way to the meeting point with Rose. But I saw him. I saw his car in my rearview mirror. He was following me. I couldn't let him to her. I couldn't let him get his hands on Leo. Your house. It was the only place I could think of. The only truly safe place in the world. I am so sorry for what I put you through. Don't you dare be sorry, I said, my voice fierce with a love and pride that felt boundless. I took her hand, the hand of the daughter I had once thought was so cold and distant. It was the hand of a warrior, a hero. You saved them, Clara. You saved them both. We sat in silence for a long time, the only sound the soft, rhythmic breathing of the baby who had, in his own way, saved us all. He had brought the secrets into the light. He had brought my daughters back to me. He had reminded me what our family was capable of, a love so fierce it would burn down the world to protect its own. The ending was not neat and tidy like in the movies. It was messy and complicated, but it was real. Rose was in a long-term, secure treatment facility in another state, fighting the hardest battle of her life with a courage I'd never seen in her before. She called every Sunday. Her voice was getting stronger each week. She asked about Leo, about his weight, if he was smiling yet. Clara and I would put the phone to his ear so she could sing him the same lullaby she'd grown up with, her voice fragile but clear across the miles. There were years of healing ahead for her, for all of us. The chasm between my daughters was still there, a canyon carved by years of pain and misunderstanding. But it was no longer a void. It was being filled, slowly but surely, with forgiveness, with a hard-won respect, and with a shared, profound love for the little boy who was the best of both of them. And me? I was no longer just Eleanor Miller, a quiet widow rattling around in a quiet house. I was a grandmother. I was a protector. I was the keeper of my family's story. As I rocked Leo to sleep each night, humming that old, familiar lullaby, I looked at his peaceful face and I saw the future. I saw Rose's untamable fire and Clara's unbreakable strength. I saw my husband's kind eyes. I saw a second chance. My daughter had asked me to watch her baby for just an hour. She had left me a mystery and a terror that almost broke me. But in the end, she hadn't abandoned him. In the end, she had brought him home. Comment which part of the story left you speechless.